So today I'd like to talk about another line from the 7-point mind training text. This line is somewhat intriguing. It says, "Don't make gods into demons." So the meaning of this is if we use some aspect of the thought training teachings, either what we have learned about thought training, Lojong, um, thinking about it, meditating on it, and so on. So using these teachings in such a way that it increases our ego, our self-centeredness, or any other afflictive emotion. So these teachings, thought training teachings, but it's true for Dharma in general. These are meant to be remedies to our afflictive emotions. They're supposed to counteract our afflictive emotions, decrease them. We should see a lessening of our afflictive emotions. But if we're not careful, then the teachings can be a cause for our afflictive emotions to increase. So it might be difficult sometimes to notice when this is happening to ourselves, because it's always easier to see other people's faults and mistakes than it is to see ourselves. So it can be helpful to look at some examples of how this can happen in other people's causing gods to turn into demons. But in doing this, we need to be careful, because this itself can be a case of turning gods into demons. Because the whole purpose of Dharma is it should be like a mirror in which we see our own mind and our own behavior and be able to recognize those aspects of ourself that need to be cleaned up so we can clean up our act. Not our physical body, our physical appearance, but our mental attitudes and behavior and so on. So Dharma should be used for that reason. But sometimes what can happen is we learn some Dharma, we learn about all the different afflictive emotions and unwise, unskillful behavior, and then we look at other people and see how they are making mistakes, they are creating bad karma, they are acting in deluded ways. And so, so Dharma should not be meant for that. That's like turning a god into demons. But just because it is easier to notice other people's faults and mistakes, I'm going to mention a few of these examples. But when we do notice other people's faults and mistakes, then we can use that as a teaching. We can think, oh, that's what I look like when I'm being that way. And then, again, use that as a mirror, to see ourselves and what we need to work on and generate the strong determination to stop that behavior. So here's some examples that I have thought of making gods into demons. So when spiritual teachers use their position, their power to abuse students, we've had lots of stories about this, especially in the last couple of years. The Me Too movement has brought things, out into the open. And so this happens with Tibetan lamas, but I've heard stories of teachers and masters of other traditions as well, Zen masters and Vietnamese masters and Theravada teachers and so on. And then, of course, other religions, Catholic priests, bishops, cardinals, Protestant ministers, Jewish rabbis, Hindu swamis, and so on. So anytime a person who has spiritual knowledge, spiritual training, and is in some kind of position of power or authority as a teacher, as a minister, or in a more administrative role, and then instead of benefiting, the whole purpose of the spiritual teachings and practice is to benefit oneself, but also to benefit others. So instead of benefiting others, or on top of benefiting others, because sometimes people do helpful things to others, but on the side they're doing these other things that are not only unhelpful, but they're downright harmful. So this is one example of turning a god into a demon. Another one is sometimes teachers give themselves fancy titles to impress others, or it could be the students doing this with their teachers. I don't think this happens too often, but I do sometimes come across, for example, His Eminence so-and-so, Lama Tulku Rinpoche. I mean, the Tibetans don't. They don't do that. So I think it's the Westerners. They're just trying to heap all these additional titles onto their teacher. And I wonder sometimes if the Lama himself even knows that they're doing that. They don't know English. They may not realize what's going on. And doing this can give the students a sense of superiority over students of other teachers who don't have such fancy titles. Oh, he's just a geshe. He just has one title, geshe. Whereas in fact, a geshe, I mean, that's a very high title, and a geshe might have much more knowledge and also genuine good qualities than somebody with a lot of fancy titles in their name. And organizations can sometimes get involved in this sort of activity of turning gods into demons. I heard of a story from a friend of mine who first started going to a Tibetan Buddhist center in his home city. And initially he was really enthusiastic about it and really, involved in everything, even became a monk and was living in the center. But after some time, he started feeling uncomfortable about some of the things that were going on, including some of the behavior of some of the other monastics in the organization. And also, he said the organization was like again and again asking him to give money and to give his things and so on. So he's feeling uncomfortable about that. And he also noticed in his own mind some unhealthy changes. For example, a feeling of pride or arrogance about being part of this organization, because the organization would make claims that they are superior to all other Tibetan Buddhist organizations, that their teachings are more pure, their teachings are more genuine, and others are somehow corrupt and impure. And so he kind of took on this sense of pride and arrogance about being part of that organization rather than other organizations. So when he saw that, when he realized that his afflictions were actually increasing rather than decreasing, he left that group and found other groups that were more healthy. So one reason this kind of thing can happen is because people have a misguided sense of guru devotion and think they have to just be a blind follower of a particular guru, or spiritual teacher, or spiritual organization, which isn't really correct. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama reminds us again and again, we need to use our intelligence, our discriminating wisdom, and check what a teacher is saying or what an organization is saying, and not just have blind faith. And then there are stories about people who use Dharma to get money, to get fame, offering courses, charging a huge amount of money, and not using the money for the benefit of others or for the benefit of the Dharma, but just to enhance their own wealth. So those are some gross examples of how it's possible to make the Dharma, which is like a god, something very pure and divine, into something harmful, like a demon. And it's probably unlikely that we would ever do things like that, but I can also see some more subtle examples of gods turning into demons that I've seen in my own experience. So one is arrogance, a sense of arrogance towards those who haven't studied as much as me, or who have less experience than I do in terms of, keeping vows and doing retreat, doing meditation, and so on. So one of my teachers, when I was in the master's program, one of the Geshes kind of warned us about this. He said, in the beginning, when you don't know much Dharma, you're not likely to feel arrogant or proud about it. But once you start learning more, then this can happen. Your knowledge gets bigger, your ego can get bigger, your arrogance can get bigger. So he warned us about that and said we really have to look out for that and be careful. And even though I know it's a problem, it still happens. It still comes up in my mind. And also sometimes a sense of impatience with other people who maybe not as knowledgeable and maybe not as quick to learn things. Another thing I've seen in myself is jealousy towards those who might be relatively new in the Dharma, but seem to have better qualities than I do. They're more kind, more generous, more quick to learn, and so on. So the comparing mind, the mind that's always comparing and sometimes feeling I am superior to them, and then being arrogant, or they are superior to me and being jealous or envious. So this is definitely not the purpose of learning the Dharma. Again, the Dharma is meant to subdue our mind, subdue our afflictive emotions, and not perpetuate them or increase them. But it is easy for these kind of things to happen because our mind is much more familiar with afflictive emotions and attitudes. Such as self-centeredness, arrogance, greed, aversion, and of course the 8 worldly concerns, attachment to gain and fame and praise and comfort, pleasure, and then aversion to the opposite of those. So, we've had so much experience with these states of mind that they just pop up so quickly, so easily, so spontaneously. So even in the context of learning the Dharma, practicing the Dharma, and being in a spiritual community and so on, these things can arise. So we just need to watch our mind with mindfulness and introspection, and also be honest about what's going on in the mind. I can see with myself, sometimes I feel so ashamed of what's going on. I try to just, push it aside. But that doesn't work. We do have to acknowledge honestly what is going on, even if it's something quite ugly, quite contrary to Dharma. And then once we notice it, then we, apply antidotes, do purification, cultivate the opposite states of mind, and so on. So there's definitely remedies to these afflictive states of mind. So just be really, really careful that we do not let the Dharma, which is godlike, divine, turn into something harmful like a demon. So Pema Chodron's commentary to this line is just one line here. She says, don't use these teachings and practices to strengthen your self-absorption. Self-absorption as well as any other unhelpful, unhealthy state of mind.